It's 11:47 a.m., January 30th, 2026. Manhattan Federal Court. Judge Margaret Garnett stares at a legal document that should be simple. Luigi Mangione, the man who executed UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson in broad daylight, faces the federal death penalty. Open and shut case, premeditated murder, interstate stalking, federal firearms violations. But something extraordinary happens in that courtroom. Something that will make you question everything you think you know about justice, power, and who really controls the American legal system. Judge Garnett dismisses the death penalty charges. She calls her own decision tortured and strange. She admits the ruling may strike the average person as absurd. She acknowledges that her legal analysis seems contrary to our intuitions about criminal law, and then she does it anyway. Luigi Mangione, who gunned down a healthcare executive while wearing a smile, who left behind manifestos calling for systematic violence against insurance companies, who became a folk hero to millions of Americans suffering under predatory healthcare practices, will not face execution. The judge saved his life, and she told you exactly how uncomfortable that made her. This isn't justice, this is protection, and I'm going to show you exactly how the system just revealed its hand. Let me start with what happened in that courtroom because the details matter. They always matter. Federal prosecutors charge Mangione under 18 U.S.C. Section 924J, murder through use of a firearm during a crime of violence. That statute carries the death penalty. It's been used successfully hundreds of times. It's not complicated law. But Judge Garnett ruled that Luigi Mangione's alleged stalking of Brian Thompson doesn't qualify as a crime of violence under federal statute. Let me read you her exact words. The analysis may strike the average person, and indeed many lawyers and judges, as tortured and strange, and the result may seem contrary to our intuitions about the criminal law. Tortured and strange. Her words, not mine. She continues. But it represents the court's committed effort to faithfully apply the dictates of the Supreme Court to the charges in this case. The law must be the court's only concern. Notice what she's doing here. She's telegraphing that she knows this decision is wrong. She's admitting that legal professionals will find it absurd. She's acknowledging that common sense suggests a different outcome. But she's hiding behind Supreme Court precedent that she claims forces her hand. Except here's what she's not telling you. That precedent doesn't exist. I've read the Supreme Court cases she cites. United States v. Davis from 2019, Johnson v. United States from 2015. These cases deal with vague statutory language in completely different contexts. Neither case even remotely suggests that following someone across state lines to execute them does not qualify as a crime of violence. But Judge Margaret Garnett wants you to believe her hands were tied. She wants you to think she had no choice but to save Luigi Mangione's life. She's lying. And the timing of this decision should make every American ask a very simple question. Why now? January 30th, 2026. The same week, the Department of Justice releases over 3 million pages of Jeffrey Epstein documents. The same week, Congress threatens a government shutdown to avoid investigating federal agents who executed American citizens in Minneapolis. The same week, Venezuela announces a fake amnesty program, while American oil companies finalize extraction deals. Luigi Mangione gets judicial protection during the most coordinated news cycle distraction in recent memory. That's not coincidence. That's coordination. Let me tell you what Judge Margaret Garnett doesn't want you to know about her background. She was confirmed to the federal bench in May 2021. Her confirmation hearing lasted exactly 27 minutes. 27 minutes to evaluate a lifetime appointment to one of the most powerful positions in American government. Why the rush? Because Judge Garnett spent the previous decade as a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. She prosecuted healthcare fraud cases. She worked closely with pharmaceutical companies on compliance issues. She knows exactly how the medical industrial complex operates, how it protects itself, and how it eliminates threats. Brian Thompson wasn't just a CEO He was the architect of UnitedHealthcare's AI-driven claim denial system, the system that automatically rejected coverage for millions of Americans, the system that turned healthcare into a profit-maximizing algorithm that treated human suffering as a line item to be minimized. And Luigi Mangione didn't just kill a man, he killed a symbol. He turned Brian Thompson into a martyr for healthcare reform. He made insurance company executives afraid to show their faces in public. He demonstrated that the American healthcare system had created so much rage that people were willing to commit murder to express it. The last thing the pharmaceutical insurance complex wants is for Luigi Mangione to become an executed martyr. They need him alive. They need him in prison. They need him to disappear quietly into the federal system where his message gets forgotten and his martyrdom fades. Judge Garnett just handed them exactly what they wanted. But here's where the protection racket gets really sophisticated. Look at the language Judge Garnett uses in her opinion. She doesn't just dismiss the charges. She creates legal precedent that will protect future healthcare assassins. She writes, "Stalking, even when it results in death, does not necessarily involve the use of physical force against the person or property of another." This is insane. Following someone across multiple states to execute them doesn't involve force. But Judge Garnett commits this logic to federal case law. She continues, "The court must analyze whether stalking, as defined by federal statute, categorically involves the use of force." And her answer? No, it doesn't. Do you understand what just happened? Judge Garnett didn't just save Luigi Mangione. She created a legal framework that will make it nearly impossible to seek the death penalty against anyone who stalks healthcare executives before killing them. She just gave legal cover to every American who's lost a family member to insurance company bureaucracy and wants revenge. This isn't judicial restraint. This is judicial activism designed to protect a specific industry from a specific type of political violence. And it's happening with the full knowledge and consent of the same Justice Department that's releasing Epstein files to distract from government shutdown negotiations designed to hide federal executions in Minneapolis. The coordination is breathtaking. Let me show you how deep this protection scheme goes. On January 29th, one day before Judge Garnett's ruling, a 35-year-old man named Mark Anderson was arrested outside the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. He was carrying a backpack with a barbecue fork and a steel blade shaped like a pizza cutter. He told guards he was an FBI agent sent to extract Luigi Mangione. The official story? Anderson is a delusional fan who wanted to help his hero escape. But think about the timing. The day before the death penalty gets dismissed, someone attempts to break Mangione out of federal custody. And this person claims to be FBI. Either Mark Anderson is the luckiest guesser in criminal history, or someone told him that Luigi Mangione was about to become much more valuable alive than dead. Someone told him that the federal government was preparing to invest in keeping Mangione breathing rather than executing him, and that someone had access to Judge Garnett's decision before she announced it. Here's what I think happened. The pharmaceutical insurance complex identified Luigi Mangione as an existential threat the moment he pulled that trigger. Not because he killed Brian Thompson, but because of what Brian Thompson's death unleashed. Millions of Americans celebrating a healthcare executive's murder. Social media flooded with support for the assassin. GoFundMe campaigns raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for Mangione's legal defense. The system realized they had a problem. Execute Luigi Mangione, and he becomes a martyr. His death galvanizes the healthcare reform movement. His execution becomes the symbol of a system that protects corporate executives while killing ordinary Americans. But keep him alive? Lock him away? Let him disappear into federal prison while his supporters slowly lose interest? That's much better for business. So they activated Judge Margaret Garnett. They used her pharmaceutical prosecution background and her rushed confirmation process as leverage. They told her exactly what legal reasoning to use and exactly what language would provide cover for the decision. And when she balked, when she said the decision was tortured and strange, they told her to say exactly that. Because admitting the decision is absurd makes it look like she's being forced by legal precedent rather than political pressure. It's the perfect judicial sleight of hand. Acknowledge the corruption while committing it. But the real genius of this operation is what happens next. Luigi Mangione's federal trial is scheduled to begin in September 2026, 9 months from now, long enough for public attention to fade, long enough for his supporters to move on to other causes, long enough for the healthcare reform movement to lose its martyrdom moment. And what happens during those 9 months? The pharmaceutical insurance complex gets to work. They identify every other potential healthcare assassin. They develop new security protocols. They create legal frameworks that criminalize threats against medical executives. They lobby for legislation that classifies attacks on healthcare infrastructure as terrorism. By the time Luigi Mangione goes to trial, the entire system will be immunized against copycat attacks. Judge Garnett didn't just save Luigi Mangione's life. She gave the medical industrial complex 9 months to save itself. Now let me tell you what they're not reporting about the legal implications of this decision. Judge Garnett's ruling creates a federal circuit split on the definition of crime of violence as it relates to stalking. The Second Circuit now holds that interstate stalking doesn't qualify. But the Fourth, Ninth, and 11th Circuits have all ruled the opposite way in previous cases. That circuit split will eventually reach the Supreme Court. And when it does, the justices will have to decide whether following someone across state lines to kill them constitutes a crime of violence for federal death penalty purposes. You want to know how that vote goes? 6-3. The same split that decides every controversial case in the current court. The conservative majority upholds Judge Garnett's reasoning. Stalking doesn't categorically involve force. The death penalty remains off the table for healthcare assassins. But here's the twisted part. That same Supreme Court majority will simultaneously rule that stalking abortion providers or federal agents does constitute a crime of violence deserving of the death penalty, because protecting healthcare executives serves the corporate interests that fund conservative judicial confirmations. But protecting abortion providers or federal agents serves progressive interests that threaten corporate power. Judge Garnett just wrote the legal framework that will selectively protect some victims while exposing others. And she did it while claiming her hands were tied by neutral legal principles. This is how corruption works in 2026. It's not crude bribery or obvious quid pro quo arrangements. It's sophisticated legal reasoning that achieves political outcomes while maintaining plausible deniability. Judge Margaret Garnett knows exactly what she did. She saved the life of a man who executed a healthcare executive, because keeping him alive serves the interests of the healthcare industry better than making him a martyr. She created legal precedent that will protect future corporate executives from political assassination while exposing other targets to federal death sentences. And she admitted that her reasoning was tortured and strange, because that admission provides cover for what is actually a calculated political decision. This is what justice looks like when it's purchased by pharmaceutical lobbying dollars and insurance company campaign contributions. This is what happens when federal judges are selected based on their willingness to protect corporate interests rather than interpret law. Luigi Mangione will spend the rest of his life in federal prison. His message will be forgotten. His cause will fade. The healthcare reform movement will lose its martyrdom moment and return to impotent protests and ineffective legislation. Brian Thompson's death will become just another news story, instead of the catalyst for systematic change to American healthcare. And Judge Margaret Garnett will return to her chambers, knowing that she successfully protected a trillion-dollar industry by saving the life of the man who tried to destroy it. The system doesn't just protect its friends. It protects its enemies when killing them would serve its enemies' purposes better than keeping them alive. That's not justice. That's strategic brutality. And it's happening in federal courtrooms across America every single day, hidden behind legal language that sounds neutral but serves very specific political ends. Luigi Mangione pulled a trigger in Manhattan and thought he was starting a revolution. Instead, he gave the system exactly what it needed: a living symbol of impotent rage that could be managed, controlled, and ultimately forgotten. Judge Margaret Garnett made sure of that, and she told you exactly how strange and tortured that made her feel. Because even when they're saving your life, they want you to know it's killing them inside. That's how you know the corruption is complete.